I never imagined myself owning an antique shop. It was my father's obsession, his dream, and frankly, I never understood his fascination with old things. But after he passed away, I inherited the shop, a cramped, dusty place at the end of a narrow cobblestone alley. My father had collected the strangest items, each with its own history, its own peculiarities. Some were merely odd, others unsettling, and a few were outright disturbing. The mirror, however, was in a league of its own. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, framed in what looked like black and silver with a sheen that hinted at its age. The carvings were intricate, almost too detailed for human hands. Serpents twisted in and out of each other around the frame, their faces frozen in expressions of agony or ecstasy. But the strangest part was that my father had left no details about it. In the store ledger, where he meticulously catalogued every item, he'd only scrawled 3 words beside the mirror: "Do not sell." At first I kept my distance. The mirror wasn't the only strange thing in the shop, after all. But eventually I found myself drawn to it, unable to shake the feeling that it was watching me. Each time I glanced at it from across the room, I'd catch something unusual in my reflection. It was always so faint that I couldn't be sure. Was my reflection a shade too dark? A bit off? Was it watching me with something more than my own gaze? One evening, staying late to work on inventory, I found myself standing in front of it. The shop was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I didn't know why, but the mirror seemed different in the dim light. The twisting faces on its frame seemed almost alive, their expressions caught between torment and wicked amusement. I leaned in, and that's when I noticed it. My reflection didn't move with me. I raised a hand to my face, and while I felt my fingers brush my skin, my reflection remained still, eyes locked on mine with an intensity that wasn't mine. My heart hammered, and I took a step back, but my reflection stayed rooted, staring, an unreadable expression slowly spreading across its face. Then, I saw it blink. The clock struck midnight, snapping me back to reality. I blinked hard, and when I looked again, my reflection was moving with me. I laughed it off, though my hands were shaking. Surely it was just my imagination, or perhaps a trick of the old glass. But as I turned to leave, something in the mirror caught my eye. A shadow flickered just over my shoulder. It was quick, too fast for me to catch properly, but unmistakable. I spun around, heart racing, but the shop was empty, as quiet and still as ever. I felt a chill crawl down my spine, like ice brushing against my skin. Slowly I turned back to the mirror. My reflection stared back, calm, collected, but somehow smug, like it knew something I didn't. I told myself I was tired, maybe a little spooked from working late. But the mirror had its hooks in me. Each day I'd catch myself glancing at it from across the room. The carvings around the frame seemed to shift subtly, almost like the faces were changing, watching. The twisted mouths appeared more sinister, the eyes hollow and dark. And the feeling that something was watching me from inside grew stronger. One night I decided I had to know. Armed with a flashlight and trembling hands, I opened my father's journals, desperate for any reference to the mirror. Hours later I found a mention. The dark glass. According to his notes, it was rumored to be cursed, a gateway of some sort, linking our world to somewhere else. "Don't look too long. Don't let it see you," he had written. My father had underlined it twice. My heart raced as I realized he had known that something was wrong with the mirror, and he'd kept it anyway. I felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he left it here for me to find? Midnight came and went as I sat, tense, staring at the mirror from across the room. I was too afraid to approach it, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. Finally, my curiosity outweighed my fear. Slowly, I walked over and stood in front of it, breathing shallowly, as if a single breath too loud might awaken whatever was lurking inside. When I looked this time, the shadow was back, clearer than before. It hovered just behind my reflection, still and waiting, its form murky like smoke barely contained. My reflection's expression changed, a sickly grin spreading across its face. My stomach twisted as I realized it wasn't me. Smiling. It raised a hand, slowly pressing it to the glass, and I saw its mouth form words I couldn't hear. But I understood. It wanted to come through. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just mimicking me. It was trying to replace me. I backed away, breath hitching, as the figure behind my reflection pressed its hand harder against the glass, its fingers splayed and ghostly. Its smile widened, stretched unnaturally, showing teeth that looked sharpened and blackened, something not human. My own reflection, in contrast, mirrored my terror perfectly. I could see the whites of my eyes, my mouth gaping open in horror, but in that same instant, it wasn't me, it was a stranger, trapped and helpless, mimicking my fear as though it were playing a game. I turned and stumbled away from the mirror, yet couldn't bring myself to leave. My feet were rooted to the ground, heart pounding as if it might explode. I clutched my father's journal, trying to summon some sense, some rational explanation. But his words echoed in my head, "Don't let it see you." And I knew I had already gone too far. The whisper came again, soft and icy, as though spoken directly into my ear. "Trade places." The words slithered into my mind, lingering like a foul smell. I twisted around, convinced someone was there, but I was alone in the darkened shop, the mirror looming in the corner, its shadow stretching across the floor toward me, reaching. I realized I couldn't avoid it. Whatever it wanted, it would not stop. Steeling myself, I stepped forward again, peering into the glass, determined to confront it. My reflection watched me, calm now, its eyes gleaming with something between malice and anticipation. The shadow behind it had fully taken form. A man, or something that once was a man. His eyes were hollow, sunken voids that seemed to draw me in, swirling with dark intent. "Trade places," it whispered again, this time directly from the mirror. My reflection's lips moved, shaping the words I heard. I tried to look away, but I couldn't move. The pull was stronger now, the air around me thickening as if the shop itself were slowly sealing me in. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced my voice to work. "What do you want?" I whispered. My reflection's eyes glinted, and it smiled a slow, menacing smile. "Freedom," it mouthed, but no sound came out. The shadow figure's hand extended forward, reaching closer to the glass's surface. I felt it. A hand, cold, skeletal, pressing against my shoulder, though I saw nothing behind me. I stumbled forward, my own hands meeting the cold glass, and the mirror seemed to come alive. A sharp, burning sensation shot through me as if I were touching ice, laced with fire. I tried to pull my hands away, but they were stuck, held by an invisible force binding me to the mirror. My reflection pressed its hands against mine, mirroring me perfectly. Only this time, its gaze grew darker, its face twisted with something like victory. I felt a sharp tug, a pull so fierce I thought my skin would tear. And suddenly, I was the one on the other side of the glass. I couldn't breathe. The world beyond the mirror became dim and muted, like looking through a fogged-up window. I pounded on the glass, watching as my former reflection, now a perfect copy of me, grinned back, relishing its newfound freedom. It turned its head, looking around the shop with my eyes, my face, my movements, and I knew it was me now. I screamed, but no sound escaped. The mirror swallowed my cries, muffling them to a whisper. I beat my fists against the glass, feeling the darkness behind me creep closer, the shadow of the man coiling around me like smoke. I was trapped, locked in place while the creature wearing my face left, closing the shop door with a soft click. Desperation took over as I tried everything, shouting, hitting the glass, even trying to break the mirror from the inside. But the more I struggled, the more the shadows wrapped around me, binding me, draining me of energy. I felt my memories, my thoughts slipping, dissolving into the void. Days passed, maybe weeks. I lost all sense of time. My prison became a silent, endless place, where the only company I had was the twisted faces carved into the frame. Their eyes seemed to follow me, watching as if to taunt me with their silent knowledge. I realized with a chilling certainty that I was becoming one of them, a mere shadow, etched into the edges of the mirror, waiting for someone else to look too long to see too much. Then one day I saw movement. A woman walked into the shop, her eyes bright with curiosity as she admired the mirror. She leaned in, close enough that I could see her clearly. I tried to scream to warn her, but all I could do was watch as the shadow behind her took shape, a familiar figure pressing its hand to the glass. It was me. Or at least it was what I had become, a twisted, hungry version waiting to be free. Once more.